Good morning, everyone. Speaker for today's session is Lalindra Weliwita. The topic he'll be speaking on strategizing your test for a large application migration. Over to Lalindra.
Thank you, Tilda. Okay, good morning and thank you all for joining. So the intention of this tech talk is to give you some insights on what sort of things you need to consider when preparing a test approach for a large application migration project. As an example, a cloud migration project, because today most of the clients are curious on cloud migrations due to the pandemic situation. So according to different sources, migration experts now predict around 80% of enterprise workloads will be in the cloud within the next near future. So this tech talk is mainly aligned with a case study, and I thought of sharing that experience with you as well. So with that, let me move on to my agenda. So these are the topics that I'm going to cover today. So first, I'm going to discuss few types of software migrations, and then I'll talk about the case study. After that, I'm going to discuss some important factors to be considered in a larger migration. And after that, I'll show you some key project risks that we need to mitigate. And then finally, I'll show you the high-level approach. Okay. So as I said, so these are some of the key types of software migrations we see today. On top left corner, you can see OS migration. So the OS migration, you're migrating the application from one operating system to another, right? And then if you take the server migration, so migrating the server data from one server to another server. So here actually the configuration also get migrated to the new server along with the server data. And another common type of migration is the database migrations. Because the migration, so in that actually we migrate the application data to a different version. It could be a newer or older version of the same RDBMS or to a different RDBMS. And the key type of migration is the application migration. You are migrating the entire application from one environment or platform to another. For example, you can say migrating application to the cloud platform. It could be a PaaS or SaaS. Because recently we have done a similar type of project to Data MTX, because they actually wanted to migrate the entire application to the cloud platform, the PaaS environment. So this tech talk is mainly aligned with this application migration. So let me move on to the case study. This particular case study is for a larger client in UK. Actually, the goal was the client actually used Open Text Content Server, called as OTCS, as one of their core content management repository, and actually they wanted to transfer this OTCS repository to the content, basically to the latest O365 SharePoint cloud platform. And as you can see, the total content volume they want to transfer, they had around 1 million folders and 5 million of files. The file in the sense they had like all the document types, images, videos, Word documents, Excels, etc. So it was kind of a new project for us, and the new Office 365 platform, they actually wanted to be the primary content repository to provide the required content to several other external systems, because they had around 5 external systems which actually got data or the documents from this content repository. So finally they actually wanted to integrate that those systems into this. And the solution approach, actually we had a discovery, an evaluation and a preparation phase, and they actually build and configure. They want to build and configure this Office 365, called as O365 Cloud Platform, with out-of-the-box features, because they didn't want to go with any customized features like web parts or any workflows. Likewise, they actually want to have the out-of-the-box features and just the repository. And from the implementation wise, they implement the content structure of the O3 platform, and as a pilot content migration, we actually wanted to migrate certain set of data prior to the actual transfer, because we actually went with an in-house migration tool because of the cost of the tools available in the market, the off-the-shelf products. So that's why actually we went with an in-house migration tool for that migration, and I wanted to migrate the full content, content to migrate, and then finally wanted to integrate with the external systems. And once we are done with the migration, we actually wanted to shut down the current platform by migrating the Delta content as well to the O365 platform, because we take the Delta content, because once we start any migration, most probably client will use their existing system, because they don't want to wait till we migrate entire thing into the cloud platform, because they want to continue their business. So likewise, they actually use the existing system until we do the migration, and then finally we want to migrate the Delta content. In data MTX also we had a similar kind of situation, because they actually done some CRs, and then after that we actually want to merge that as well to the final migrated application. So likewise, there are some Delta content, and the targeted QA outcome actually we actually wanted to make sure the platform is ready for an uninterrupted content migration, because before we migrate, what sort of things we need to test, right? We wanted to make sure that. And then once we start the migration, so we actually want to make sure a seamless transition from OTCS to O365. And also the next point is we want to guarantee the user experience on their existing functionalities. That is very important. If you migrate any application, we don't know how the application will behave in the new environment. So we as a QA, we always need to make sure they have a better user experience. And then once after that, we actually wanted to cross-check the integrations, because they want to, as I said, they want to integrate with their external system. So as QA, we need to always make sure how the integrations work, whether there are any issues and the integrations work fine with the other external systems. So likewise. So that is the brief introduction about this particular case study. And so in these type of projects, there are some important factors which we would have to we need to consider, right? There could be an impact on the effort, right? And the strategy. So in that case, we need to consider these important factors before we start any type of a migration project. So as you can see, the first point, the volume of the content, right? So we can't just go with the count. You always have to check the size, right? And and whether we are migrating all or a subset, because we need to consider content upload rate per hour or the average file size, etc. when coming up with the estimates. Especially this is important for the development teams and also the project managers if we are creating a proper project plan. And the next point is in these type of projects, sometimes we may have to use any migration tools. So in that case, we need to check whether, we are going with an off-the-shelf tool or are we going to build an in-house tool, right? So because of that, the strategy may get changed, right? Based on the type of the tool. Because if you are going with an off-the-shelf tool available in the market like Migration Center, AI Data Point, ECA Wise, right? They are very high-cost tools, but we need to think about that as well. And the third point is, so if you are migrating, right, we need to consider, are there any data protection laws for that particular region? For example, GDPR, right? So this GDPR, so the penalty is huge if you break the GDPR rules. So we need to double check, Are there any specific restricted data that we can't migrate to any cloud platform or different regions, right? So we have to think about that. And the rules bind with the content, the fourth point. So because in this type of content migrations, there are some obsolete or insignificant or unuseful data. So in that case, before we start any migration, we need to check whether there are any content or anything that we need to move out before the migration. So that's important. And the content location. So take the content location, whether it's a cloud or whether we are migrating to on-premise, or is kind of are we going to follow an hybrid approach? For example, now in this case, there are some, as I said, we had to go with SharePoint 260 server on-premise platform for some of the secure client data, and there are for the non-secure client data, we actually went with the O365 SharePoint Cloud platform. So likewise, we had to cross-check these things. And the next point is the content security, the privacy, because we always deal with the production data, right? So there could be some sensitive data. So because of, and also there are some data protection laws, right? So in that case, how we are going to handle this? Sometimes we may have to mention these things in our NDA, and especially if we are creating any test plan, in there also we have to mention how we are going to handle the production data, right? So those are the important points. And the next point is the third party software requirements, right? For example, now if we want to, so once we migrate whatever the content, right? So are we going to do some checks on the content itself, right? So in that case, are there any third-party software that we need to get, right? So we need to think about that. And obviously, if you are going with kind of a larger migration, okay, what could be the test accelerators that we can use? Because we need to identify the areas to be automated. For example, now in this case, we actually, before we migrate, whatever the things, we wanted to cross-check the folder structure, for example, right? So in that case, we actually came up with a kind of small Java tool to double-check the source and the destination parts, whether they are okay to do the migration. So likewise, we always have to think what are the areas that we need to automate. It could be a small tool, right? We don't want to go with some Selenium or automated tools, right? We can come up with our own simple automation tools, right, for these things. And access to the existing application is another important point, because sometimes we don't get much time to do the migration. For example, the data MTX, right? We had only 1.5 months to do the migration and do the testing. So in that case, it is very important to get the access for whatever the existing application. One thing is to get the proper the knowledge of that application. We need to thoroughly understand the application, right? And then, so what are the end-to-end test flows that we need to test once we're done with our migration? So that we need to identify. And also there could be some existing defects in the application. So because once we're done with the migration, we can't identify all the issues. There could be new issues, there could be issues which are already in the existing system. So in that case, it is important to cross-check against the existing application. So that is another important point. And then finally, the external system integrations, right? So before we do our planning, we need to double check, okay, are there any inbound integrations or outbound integrations, or are there any both side integrations, right? If it is inbound, then definitely we have to do some particular testing. But let's say if it is only an outbound integration, then we need to talk to the external parties and we need to coordinate with them. Okay, so when they need to do this testing, so it is important for us to identify these things for a proper planning, right? So, so these are some of the key important factors we need to consider. There could be more and could be vary based on your the project, right? So with that, Let me talk about some of the key project risks. So as I said earlier, we always have to deal with production data, right? So how we are going to mitigate? So what sort of actions we need to take? So we need to think about that. And definitely the performance, right? Because once we migrate to another platform, client might not know, right, what would be, how the application would behave, right? Because they think, okay, once we done with the migration, okay, my application is now done, right? I can get a better experience, like, but as consultant, you always have to propose these things, right? If we are going to do the performance testing, then how we are going to do it, right? And or else is there any other party going to do the performance? For example, now if you take the data in TX project, right? Once we done with the migration, they actually experience significant performance issues because the time-wise is very huge than the existing environment. But before we start the project, actually we had an agreement like, oh, we are not going to do the performance test. So likewise, we had to create a boundary, right, before we start. But performance testing is must if you are doing a migration project. And then the security, right? Security testing is also another important risk that we need to mitigate. But the testing perspective, okay, we need to check, okay, whether we are going to do the security testing or there are some external companies who do the security testing. So whether they are going to do it or likewise, we need to set the boundary. And the next risk is how well the existing features would function, right? That is the key, the risk that we need to mitigate through our testing. Okay, in that case, how we are going to mitigate? Are we going to do a full feature level testing, or else we are just doing a kind of a regression? Are we going to do only a end-to-end testing, right? So that is important to identify upfront and mitigate that. And also the application dependencies, as I said, okay, are we going to mitigate that through any integration test or any other way that we are going to mitigate? Likewise, we need to identify these risks upfront and mention the mitigation plans in your project approach or the project plan. Sorry, the test plan, right? So there could be more risks, but these are some of the key risks that we need to mitigate, right? So so let me describe the high-level approach that we need to now follow. So as you can see, so in these type of migration test, there are 3 phases mainly we need to work on, right? So we can't just do our testing only after we done with the migration, right? So the first phase is the pre-migration test. Okay, what sort of things we need to test before we start the migration, right? And then what are we going to test during the migration? And then what are we going to test once we are done with the migration? So these things we need to properly plan, right? So before any test, we need to come up with a proper test plan, right? We need to thoroughly study the old system as well as the new system requirements. It is important. And then we need to clearly come up with your test plan, and we need to get the sign off from the client, right? Because setting the boundary upfront is very important in any migration project. It is not just we can't just do a kind of functional test, right? So that's why we always have to define your test plan and define your test boundary, right? So let me talk about the pre-migration test. So as you can see, the first point, right, on the functional and content migration test, I say it's like content migration test because for this particular case, we have to do that. And so the first point, the migration tool verification. Okay, right, this testing is not required, or we can limit the test if we are going with an off-the-shelf tool, right? But obviously, we need to consider the full testing if we are going with the inbuilt in-house tool, right? So we need to check all the key functionalities, the configuration, etc. And then the next point is the new platform readiness verification, right? So before we migrate, okay, we need to do some certain checks whether the platform is now ready. There is some part that the technical team may have to do, like while going through some checklist or something from the technical aspect, and from the QA aspect, right? For example, if you take this particular case, we have to double check the access permission, and then the site and the folder structure is in place, right? Whether are there any, have we considered all the limitations, right, before we transfer? For example, now in SharePoint, I think sometimes we can't exceed the document name than 256 characters, right? So we have encountered those type of issues. Because some of the clients actually name their document which actually exceed more than 256 characters. So how we are going to handle that, right? Are we going to come up with a kind of a naming format, right? So we need to first agree that with the client, okay, this is how we are going to do, and then you take the full path of your entire the document, right? So we can't exceed more than 320 characters, right? So those kind of limitations are there. So we need to cross check. And then the verification of data or content need to be migrated. Now this is important if actually client wants to migrate a certain set of their data or something, right? So as QA, we need to always double check, okay, have we done the proper filtration for our data before we migrate, right? And then only we can give the go ahead, okay, right, the content is now ready to do the migration, right? And then we need to check other certain file format support or anything that based on your project, we need to properly plan this pre-migration test. Okay, now we'll go to the migration test. Right now here this means like now we are actually started the migration. Now what sort of things? Now if you can see here, sometimes you may have to verify some of the logs for any errors, right? And then okay, we need to cross check, right? Are there any crashing issues happening when we are doing the migration? And then we need to check a certain set of documents, right? Once we start the migration, for example, whether they are going to the proper location or are we migrating the required content, right? But as I noted there, now we can go with a sample content set if you can't go with an automated approach, right? If you have automated everything, then that's fine. You can quickly do this verification. But if you are going with a sample content, right, we always have to double check that with the client, because we can't come up with our own sample set, because client may want to do the test for a different set of items, right? So that is important. And also once we started the migration, we are not migrating everything at once. There could be some key features or functions we migrate first. So we need to start the key functional testing as well once we start the migration. So then only we can identify whether there are any major issues or blockers in their functionalities within the new environment. Or else, and also we can go with the UI test, right? Are there any major UI issues in the new environment? We need to cross check, right? And finally, we need to do the post-migration test. So this is the most important part. Now we are done with the migration, so we can't just do a high-level test. We can't do that, right? Now, for example, if you take this particular case, right? We wanted to make sure the final the file or the data count, right? Whether we migrated everything. But if you don't have an automated solution, it is very difficult to do these things, right? And we need to cross-check the content of some of the documents, right? We face some issues with the document because the team actually migrated the documents, but the name was fine, but when you open it, the content was wrong, right? So it's due to an issue with the migration tool. So that kind of things could happen. So that's why we always have to, sometimes we always have to go with a sample content set. And we need to start your end-to-end testing, right? For example, now with the data intakes also, we follow the same approach because we got the critical path from them up front. So then, so once we are done with the migration, then we need to start our end-to-end testing or the critical paths testing, right? That is important to make sure the application is now working fine, right, without any major issues. And then the Delta content migration or the feature test we need to carry out, because as I said, there is a Delta within the system, right? We can't shut down the existing system once we start the migration, right? Once we're done with, only we can shut down that, right? So then we need to consider the Delta, and then we need to migrate and do the same kind of test on top of that as well. So during that particular period, we may need to shut down their existing system to avoid any further new additions, right? And then it's the right time to start with our performance and the security test, as I said, because now once we done with our whatever the end-to-end test, and once we identify the application is stable now, we can start with your performance test and whatever the security test. And then the integration test, it could be us or it could be the other party, right? It's kind of a collaborative effort, so we can start with your integration test. And then finally, we can do the release, right? We can give the release to your UAT or whoever by giving our sign-off. So this is basically that I wanted to cover during this tech talk. I know it's a bit high level, but I believe I have covered most of the important stuff, and I believe that you got something out of this. So I think almost 30 minutes is gone. So before I wind up, we can discuss any questions if you have. Thank you.
Okay, seems like no questions. So thank you, Lalindra, for that knowledge adding session. Thank you everyone for taking part. Have a nice day.